Welcome to the Netherworld final tour. This is going to be a video showing you the entire Netherworld of my Beetlejuice project finished. And it's right here on my desk, which is why I'm pointing down. Now I have a few things to do before I can call it finished. So if you want to go straight to the tour and you don't want to see the things I'm doing to wrap it up, you can go to this timestamp and see all four and a half, I guess I would say, spaces in the Netherworld. The rest of the project is not complete, so you will be seeing these spaces again in the final tour of the entire project, but I thought I would do a dedicated video just over these spaces because they are so unique compared to the interiors you will see in the house. A while ago on one of my videos, I got a really interesting comment that was suggesting that I paint little bugs on the magnet wall openings in the house. And I love that idea, especially because those magnet walls will be open when the project is displayed. So it makes sense to do something special in those spaces. And because this is a Beetlejuice project, the bugs just made sense to me. And I don't have any magnet walls in the Netherworld, but I do have some areas of transition, like some exterior walls. So I thought I would add bugs to those places, and it would be a good place for me to try out this idea to hopefully know what I'm doing by the time I get to the magnet walls in the main house area. So the first thing I want to figure out is how I'm going to make these bugs look good. So let's get started. I had several ideas on how I wanted to do this, but I knew for sure I wanted to keep the bugs consistent all over the house, in the main part of the house and the Netherworld. So my first idea was to try stamping the bugs. So I'm using the ends of erasers and I sketched out what I thought I wanted the bugs to look like. I have these wood carving tools that I thought might help me carve them out, but they ended up being more just like tearing the rubber than doing anything, so maybe they're better for wood, which is what they're supposed to be used for. So I ended up using my craft knife very carefully, trying to make sure I don't hurt myself, and I carved out the bug body. It didn't quite look as delicate and bug-like as I wanted. It looked more like a squashed frog. So my next plan was to just stamp the body without the legs, and I thought I could maybe add the legs on afterward, which would give me a bit more control and it would be easier to make them very thin. Overall, I was pretty happy with the results when it came to the stamp pad on paper and then using a ballpoint pen to create the little legs. I thought they looked really fun and Beetlejuice-like, and I just kept making more body shapes. I think I ended up with maybe 5 different body shapes. One of them was more of a spider shape, and then there was like a football shape, and I just went for it. I had a lot of fun making these. But of course, then it was time to practice this on the project itself. So I took my stamps that I had been using with a stamp pad and decided to try them with acrylic paint. And the reason I decided to try this is because I knew there were going to be different surfaces that I was going to have to stamp on, and all I had was a black ink pad, and I know ink pads can be expensive. I did not like how they came out. Part of the problem is my painting skills on making things very thin and delicate. So my first try wasn't my favorite. So thankfully I did this on a surface that was mostly painted black so I could paint over the results and try again. I showed my results to the members on Patreon and here on YouTube, and they had several suggestions on how to fix some of the issues I was having. One of the suggestions was to completely leave out the legs and just do the antenna. Another suggestion was to spread them out more, make them a bit more sparse so it wasn't just bugs everywhere. And then there was a suggestion to actually use an ink pad, which I think would work, but I just don't use ink enough to invest in a bunch of ink pads in different colors. Another suggestion was to use maybe an iridescent color or a color closer to the background so they didn't stand out as much. Now I tried all of these, and again I think this comes down to my painting skills and just being able to get a very thin line. I kind of like the look of this slug that I hand painted. I did decide maybe I just need to skip the stamps and just start hand painting them, but they were coming out all different shapes. I felt like they weren't going to be consistent enough when it came to painting them all over the project. And another issue I came up with was putting them onto an uneven surface. This is the edge of a piece of plywood, which I do have in a couple parts of my project, and stamping them was a little bit more difficult, and I had to end up filling in their bodies. Even though these aren't the final bugs, I did learn a lot from this process, and I did like the little dots I did between the bugs. I think it made it feel more like there's a path, even if the bugs aren't going entirely from the bottom to the top. Another suggestion I got was just to laser cut them, and this was a whole project in itself because the legs were so thin I had to test my settings over and over again because the laser just wanted to burn the legs off. Now, I do think this project is totally possible to do by hand. I just did not have the delicate, tiny painting skills that I needed. Plus, this is not a major part of my project. It was just a fun idea that I want to keep fun, and I don't want it to be frustrating. So what I did was laser cut the bugs, and then I did iridescent paint over the paper, and then added them to the wall with dots. I think this could also be done with confetti or maybe bugs that are nail art. Now that I'm pretty happy with how the bugs are looking, I need to finish up the rest of the edges. Some of the edges of the spaces I have worked on while I was working in that area, and some of them have been kind of forgotten. So I'm going to move the base around to make sure I can look at each individual diorama and make sure that it's complete and that I have painted around all of the edges and fixed anything that needed fixing. It would have been very smart for me to paint the edge of Saturn while I was working on it because I think I ran out of that paint color. So now I am mixing on the surface itself a little bit of yellow and orange as I go along, trying to match the edge with the color of the sand that I have shown in this space. Thankfully, that went pretty well, and I feel like it seamlessly blends into the sand that I've put on Saturn. If you watched the Saturn series, you'll know that I did paint yellow on the walls at one point, so there were a couple spots where I needed to touch up the blue sky, so I did that very quickly as well. I'm going to add some more of the bugs that I previously laser cut to the side. This is going to be a very cramped area to view them, but I think it's a fun detail on the edge of the very blue sky. They don't stand out too much here, but I think that's okay. I don't want them to draw the eye too much. It's just a fun way to add a bit of Beetlejuice decoration to any plain edges. I now feel like this area is complete, so I can turn the base and move on to the next, but not before you hear Bailey chasing something down in her dreams. This corner edge is shared with Juno's office, and sometimes when an edge is shared, it's kind of difficult to know what color should I paint this area, and black is always a good answer because it's very neutral for most of the areas in Beetlejuice. There's some sort of black detailing. This one was another great one to add some little silver bugs climbing up the wall. The silver is going to pull out the details in some of the filing cabinets and the silver lights in Juno's office. I guess I really didn't want to pay attention to any of the edges when I was working on Juno's office because none of these were painted. So again, I'm going with black, which is going to blend in with my speaker. And after the edge was painted black, I felt like I needed a bit more black on this column just to blend everything together. And of course, we're adding more bugs. And this is when I became really happy that I used the laser cutouts because this is a very bumpy wall. I mixed sand into this wall paint, and the bugs would have had a really hard time being painted on that bumpy texture. I did have to dust out the waiting room because it had been a while. I had painted the edges of the waiting room, but since I made it so long ago, there were some drips of green paint from the top edge of the base, and so I had to go in and just repair some of the edge paint that I had previously done. The next project that I need to face, you wouldn't necessarily see if I was doing a tour of the inside of the rooms, but I need to paint the top of the base. Originally, I just did a base coat of this purple paint that I had quite a bit of, but you are possibly going to see the edge of this base, and I want it to look like it's the inside of the hill, and that is why I am painting the very edge of it brown. The other thing I need to do is mark on the base where it's safe to lift it. Because of the many ceiling finishes on the inside of each space, it's very limited on where you can put your hand inside the base and lift it by the top. So I'm adding that information to the very top so no one has to guess whether or not, if they lift the base in that area, if it's going to crush a ceiling detail. Now that I have all the paintwork and the bug work finished in each of my areas, I need to set everything back up. Many of these areas have been knocked over time, whether I'm moving the base and I just push everything over so it doesn't fall out, or some of these items went to Tucson with me recently to the museum, so I have to set them back up in the waiting room. I'm going to get every single room ready so I can do the final tour. I don't think this entire base has had everything in it all at once, ever. So this is the first time it's been like this. After all that, it's now time for the Netherworld tour. I know this probably isn't the part you want to see, but I did want to show you how the wires look coming out of the top hole. They will come out of the bottom eventually once the base is constructed completely. So here's the first room. This is the Netherworld hallway. It's the first Netherworld room I built, and I have learned so much since I started the Netherworld. I would do several things differently this time, and honestly, with the detail in the other areas, I feel like I need to add something in here, but that will definitely have to be towards the end after everything else is complete. Next to the hallway is the second room that I built, which is the waiting room. And you can see the level in detail goes up quite a bit here, specifically because of all of the waiting room characters. Each one of these characters was so fun to create, to research, and even the room itself, I feel like it has that waiting room vibe. Now I will say, right before I started filming the final tour, the lamp lights went out. We blew a fuse. So unfortunately for the final tour, I do not have the fuse, but it is on order and I will have those lamps working before the final tour of the entire project. Next to the waiting room is the third room that I worked on, which is Juno's office. And again, there is a ton of detail packed into this small space and another set of Netherworld characters. The football players have to be some of my favorite characters in the movie, and I enjoyed making their doll versions so much. I really do love this room. to Juno's office and Flat Stanley's small space is Saturn, which you will see is the brightest area in the Netherworld because, of course, we're supposed to be outside in this scene. This was the final Netherworld space that needed to be worked on. It was very different from all of the other spaces. As you can see, I really did enjoy creating it. It was very challenging in all sorts of new ways. And if you saw my most recent video, you will know I had to create this fan cover. You can see that the fan is finally hooked up and it is drawing hot air out of the interior space with all of the wiring and electrical panels. And once you go past that, you're back to the original room. So that's the tour of the entire Netherworld. You'll have to let me know which space is your favorite now that they are all done. I think each space was my favorite as I was working on it, but if I had to say that one was just like, it just came out exactly as I wanted it to, I don't know. I think it's a tie between the waiting room and Juno's office. I think there's just so much detail packed into each one of those spaces. They both took such a long time, and I think they came out really, really well. As I finish up each layer of my project, and I say layer because it literally is kind of like a layer cake. The Netherworld is a layer, and then there is the garage layer that has the hill, and then there's the first floor and the second floor and the attic floor. So as I finish up each layer, what I want to do is make sure I have adequate storage for the miniatures that I've created along the way. When I was working on the Addams Family project, I didn't work on storage until the very end, and I was packing the items up to go to the museum. So instead of rushing this and kind of panic buying storage to make sure I have room for everything, I'm going to be doing that as I go along. So now that I've done the tour, I want to protect the miniatures that are inside of those scenes, because I have had instances where pieces have fallen out. I've had a table that's been chewed on by a dog. I've had different things happen to where I know that now that things are complete, I need to protect them to make sure there's not anything that I have to redo down the line. I purchased a large order of these plastic shoe boxes, so I hope these will work really well for the different things I need to store in them. I think they're a pretty good size. Thankfully, the hallway doesn't have too many removable miniatures, so it's just the sandworm and then the cover that covers up the room of exorcised souls or whatever it's called. And so I'm starting to lay out some of the miniatures from the waiting room, and then I realized they're just going to kind of slide all over the place. They're going to hit into each other, so I'm taking them back out to add in some tissue paper. This is not going to be the final pack up of these miniatures because I may repack them whenever I end up taking everything over to the museum. However, I do want to just make sure I have these storage items in place. And I know I will want to do a final tour with everything at the end, so there's no reason to wrap everything in tissue paper and make sure it's ultra secure. But I also don't want them sliding into each other as I'm moving these storage bins around, so the tissue paper helps with that. I'm going to be storing both the dolls and furniture, so essentially the rooms are empty. The only furniture that's going to be staying in the rooms is Juno's desk, I believe, because Juno's desk is hooked up to a wire that goes directly to the LED panel so that her lamp will light up. And I did remember that I've had this sandworm stick to a couple things because I did cover it in Mod Podge, so I'm going to put a layer of wax paper between the sandworm and anything underneath it so that I don't have that problem again. Thankfully, all of these boxes are stackable, so I'm hoping they'll be easy to store. I want to get some larger storage bins that these fit into, so I can probably take them to possibly a Home Depot or Lowe's and see how many I can get into a bin and then purchase those larger bins accordingly. Thankfully, I only needed one bin for Juno's office furniture, and then the dolls all fit into another bin. And poor Juno is just going to constantly be followed around by her football players who love to call her coach. So that's it for the packing up of the Netherworld. Now I can be sure that all of my miniatures are safe and secure from dogs and everything else. So that's all I have for you for today's video. I know it was kind of a weird one of finishing up some items and then doing a tour, but it's not the final project tour. But I thought it would be fun just to kind of highlight the Netherworld and the fact that that part of the project is complete, which is very exciting, but we still have a long way to go with the Beetlejuice project. So I hope you'll stay around, like, subscribe, make sure you have notifications on if you want to make sure you see every single video that's coming out until this project is done. And I want to say thank you to Kat for my Beetlejuice earrings. I literally have Beetlejuice hanging from both of my ears. Perfect for this video, but I think it's a really good thing that I only have two. I don't have a third one. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I will see you in the next one. And in the next one, I will be working on the first floor. I think it's time to start finishing up layer by layer things that are close to being done so I can mark them off my list. So the first floor is coming up. I need to finish the lights, I need to do the punch list, and I had a very kind viewer help me with the front door so that it can actually open up all the way. So lots coming up, and I'm very excited to get further and further on this project. I hope you all have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye! And it's time to get the base off of my desk. I'm so excited it can go over there. Be not on my desk anymore because I keep hitting it with my knee. You gonna sing with me, Stormy? We're so excited, we're dancing. We're so excited that I get my desk back. We're so excited, we're so excited. Yes we are, yes we are.